Have you ever played a tabletop game, or have you ever watched fantasy and wished that you could play? Well, uh, Dungeons and Dragons is a great game to play. However, starting can be quite confusing. The most confusing part, in my opinion, is the character creation process. However, through lots of time, I have been able to learn the process and become good at it. And so, in this speech, I'm going to teach you the different components of creating a D&D character. Now, this includes selecting stats, choosing a race, choosing a class, and choosing a background. Those are the main points I'm going to be covering today. Now, the first one is uh, choosing your stats. Now, there are different methods, but the method that I'd go with whenever I am DMing meaning being the dungeon master, the leader of the game. Throughout the process of creating your character, you will be talking to the dungeon master and working with them. And it is their rules, so some of these things may be different depending on your dungeon master. When I run stats, the stats are what your player uses to interact with the world. The stats being charisma, intelligence, wisdom, strength, dexterity, and constitution. Now, a quick rundown of those is that strength is how much you can lift or how hard you can hit things. Dexterity is how well you can dodge or how well you can throw things or use ranged items for. Constitution is how tough you are, either how many hits you can take or how much you can stomach, how survivable you are. Your wisdom is your ability to interact and see your environment, your perception of the world around you. Intelligence is your knowledge, your head knowledge, like how much you know about the things in the world, like history or religion. And charisma is how well you can play with others and how well you are perceived, and also your ability to lie. All of these are your stats, and so when I choose stats, what I typically do is you roll 4 6-sided dice, and then you add up the three highest numbers, and you do that for each one, for each stat, and then you'll distribute them. Um, just depending on what you're going for with your character, you will have different stats be your highest. But as for your character, race is going to be pretty important. It is who you are. It adds to your play, but also your backstory. So there's different options. There's elves, there's humans, there's dwarves, there's halflings, there's dragonborn, there are tieflings, there are half orcs, and those are just the basic ones in the Player's Handbook, which is a book that is owned by Wizards of the Coast that most D&D players own. Um, Now, I mentioned that there are some different rules that a dungeon master can give. One of the rules, one of the most famous rules in D&D, is called the Rule of Cool, as mentioned in the Dungeon Master's Guide. If the DM says that it can happen, then it can happen. The best thing about D&D is that it does not follow the strict rules. You can add or take away whatever you want from the system. So there can be more or less races in the world of the DM. All of these are things that the DM is allowed to change. The Dungeon Master's Guide, by the way, is another book owned by Wizards of the Coast that a lot of D&D players possess. Moving into class. Class is what your character is going to be. It's like who they are and their abilities. There's multiple to choose from, but there are three main types. There is martial classes, casters, and half casters. So martial classes are people who do not use magic, and they typically are fighter classes or different ones like that. A fighter is a good starting class for that type. Then you've got half casters, such as paladins. Paladins are kind of like holy warriors. They only cast a few spells, but they are kind of like a mix in between a martial class and a half caster. Now, full casters are going to be people like wizards who have spells that they can cast and use as they go along. But those are a few different options. There are 12 base classes in the player's handbook that I can't really cover today because of time. But there are lots of options to choose from. Last thing is moving into the more story element part of character creation is your background. Now, your background is kind of like your catalyst for your backstory. It's a one-worded title that will give you kind of direction in how you are constructing your character's story. Like, you can have an acolyte, or you can have a scholar, or you can have a thief. Like, so it is a catalyst of your player's backstory. But coming to the end of my speech here, just to recap, there are the four main parts of character creation are your stats, your race, your class, and your background. And all of these are really important. It is also very important to work with your DM when you are making your character. You will typically be using one of these. It is a character sheet, and it is going to have all the information that you need for your character when you are playing the game. But yeah, thank you for coming.